Welcome viewers, back to another episode of Fozcast, AJB721 here, and I want to talk about F1 pre-season testing. It happened last weekend, and there's a lot to go through. So I've done a comprehensive study on timings and stuff, and I want to go through all the numbers that I have found. Now obviously, you have to take into account the fact that we don't know fuel runs, we don't know, fuel loads, we don't know fuel loads, we don't know what kind of program they're running, what kind of engine mode they're running, things like that, and all these things can affect pace. But I'm going to explain to you what I did. I took all of the drivers' times from across all the sessions that they did, and I averaged them. I created a mean average, and that kind of showed me the average pace of every driver, and then I averaged the pace of all the drivers to create a constructors table, and I'm about to show you all of that. Now, as we know, 21 drivers as opposed to the normal 20 competed in pre-season testing, which means somebody has to come last outside of all the drivers. And I'm very sad to say that in 21st place was Sebastian Vettel with a 1:35.877. Now, to be fair to Sebastian, his car had very poor reliability. He did not get a lot of runs out. He was in the garage a lot because of a gearbox problem in day 2. They had another problem on the first day. In fact, they just had problems every day. So the only ones that he managed to do was, install laps, which are obviously quite slow. So I don't expect him to be 21st. Well, he can't be 21st unless Nico Hulkenberg comes in. But yes, just a very poor test for Sebastian in general. Now, going through the rest of the grid, we have in 20th, Roy Nissany with a 1:34.789, as you'd expect. 19th, Mick Schumacher with a 1:33.929. Yeah, you'd sort of expect that. I mean, you'd hope he beats Egghead, but 19, that's about Haas pace. 18th, Valtteri Bottas. Whoa, hello. Hang on a minute. He's got 1:33.182. That Mercedes looked poor. Very, very poor. It spun so many times. The rear end did not look stable. And even though they have more pace than the numbers will show, I genuinely believe that car is going to be very hard to handle, like the Red Bull last year. I think Mercedes are really going to have to work to fix that. In 17th, Nikita Mazepin with 1:33.143, so not too far ahead of the Mercedes, but to be fair, Mazepin had a decent test given that he was in a Haas, but yeah, obviously still not amazing pace. 16th, Lance Stroll with a 1:32.781, comfortably beating Sebastian Vettel, but the car doesn't look great at the moment on pace either. He's definitely got more pace at the moment. I don't believe that will be the case for the season, but it's just interesting, to be honest, that Aston just couldn't really seem to get going, and that's displayed here. 15th, Lewis Hamilton with a 1:32.112. As you'd expect, he beats his teammate, but the car wasn't a great package, as I've already said. In 14th, Nicholas Latifi with a 1:31.672. Now that is surprising. Latifi had a great testing. Well, Williams had a good testing. Yeah, it's hard to say with individual drivers because it's not really about them. But that's a good average time from Latifi, although to be fair, he did only compete in one session, and that is one advantage that he has over everybody else, because all of their times were divided by 3, whereas his time was only divided by 1. In 13th, Kimi Raikkonen with a 1:31.543. I tell you what, Alfa were doing bits. You'll see all of how the teams did in a minute, but yeah, showing that he's still got it, he's still got some kind of pace on him. In 12th, Charles Leclerc with a 1:31.538. To be honest, I find Ferrari very hard to place out of that test. They look better than they were, but I genuinely can't tell where they actually slot in on the field. I don't know whether they have made a step up further than the people ahead of them or not. We'll find out. But very spicy. And if how close he was to Kimi Raikkonen wasn't spicy enough for you, you should see how close he is to Carlos Sainz in 11th. Only 4 thousandths off. Carlos Sainz's average pace was 4 thousandths ahead of Leclerc. Track conditions as well, I forgot to mention that first, but track conditions probably played a part in that. But that is really interesting that Carlos has come in and on average he's quicker. I think that could be a sign of things to come. Who knows? In 10th place, Daniel Ricciardo with a 1:31.521. Looking at this list, I can't help but think that Daniel Ricciardo got a little bit unlucky with the session times that he had, because he had 2 of the mornings, I think, which means he was the one in worse conditions for the most part. Which means even though on his sessions he had good times, like he was consistently top of the timesheets, by the end of the day, when there had been some track evolution, he was kind of further down. And I do think that has hurt his pace here. But a 1:31.5, that's still not anything to sniff at, you know, but definitely I think he's got more in him than that. 9th, Yuki Sonoda with a 1:31.488. Yuki Sonoda came out of nowhere this test, especially day 3 at the end. Now, I know he had that moment where the DRS was open a bit early, and that probably did contribute to his testing time, and I understand that, but even so, what does 50 metres on the DRS make? Like what, 2/10 maybe? The fact is, he still came very close to Max Verstappen, and that is interesting. Do I think AlphaTauri will have that kind of pace? Probably not, but it has to be said, they look really good at testing, and Yuki Tsunoda is looking like he's going to be fighting up there, and, you know, could even get a podium out of a lucky race. In 8th, Antonio Giovinazzi with a 1:31.353. That is very, very surprising. Probably one of the standout performances. One of them, you'll see. But 8th, that is quite high for an Alfa. I don't think Alfa achieved an 8th place at all last season. So for Gio to be on average 8th and very much faster, well, by 2/10 than Kimi, is good. But again, track conditions, fuel runs, you know, we can't read too much into it, but just on pure numbers, being so far ahead of Kimi, like what's that, 5 places ahead, that's really good for him. In 7th, Fernando Alonso with a 1:31.329, staying exactly where I put him in my predictions, so, you know, he's done me a favour there. But Alonso looked like he could bring it. He looked like not a lot of his pace had gone, and I think it's really great to see him back. I think that testing time is just a glimmer of things to come. In 6th place though is his teammate Esteban Ocon with a 1:31.228, and to be honest, Alpine I think were quite underrated. I think they had a really good test, and I think they showed quite good pace, to be honest, and I don't think Ocon will be faster than Alonso when the time comes, but the fact is they are very similar on pace. They're next to each other, and if they can be next to each other on track, I think that's all Alpine really wants out of them, doesn't it? You know, because if they're consistently finishing 6th and 7th, let's say, maybe even higher, 6th and 7th, what is that? That's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's 14 points per race, 14 times 23, I mean, you do the math, that's a lot of points. But obviously they'll be expecting to be fighting higher than that, and you know, the pace, it looks like at the moment they could fight higher than that, you know, we'll see. In 5th place, Pierre Gasly with a 1:31.157. As I've said, the AlphaTauri pace at testing was amazing, and I think it was much higher than anybody expected it to be. Gasly is fighting arguably for Ocon's seat, and it's a strong start to say that you are faster than him in what is supposedly a worse car from last year. Obviously we don't know this year, but yeah, I think it's interesting, and I do wonder what AlphaTauri have been doing, if they've turned up the engines maybe or something, or if they do genuinely have that pace. I think we're in for a spicy midfield battle. In fourth place, Sergio Perez with a 1:30.935. He's the first 1:30 that we have on this list. And well, I'm not going to lie, 2 tenths ahead of Gasly isn't great, but he's definitely more comfortable than Alex Albon or Pierre Gasly were in that Red Bull, and that is what's going to count for them, because they want to be firing at the front for 1-2s, and I do think that pace is good enough for a 1-2. Sergio did have worse track conditions, I think, but interestingly enough, Lawrence Barretto reported that Sergio was apparently ahead of Max on long run pace, which is very, very spicy if that's true, because if you can beat Max Verstappen as a teammate, like, he's never been beaten by a teammate. You know, Carlos Sainz gave him a run for his money, but if he can beat him, that should be a warning sign for Max Verstappen, honestly. And I just think that'd be entertaining, to be honest. But on pace so far, he's still behind him. Now we come to the top three. And in third place, this is one that makes me happy, and it's probably going to make a lot of people happy. It's Lando Norris with a 1:30.712. To be honest, Lando had great conditions. The car was very reliable, very stable. McLaren looks like they have a brilliant package this year, and yeah, I can't praise him and Daniel enough, really, because they've done a really good job. They've had a really solid test, and the third best time on average. Remember, these are average, these aren't the best times. I've not just stolen the best times and put them on. This is his average pace, so on average he's third. That is a really good sign for him and for his growth, you know, in a year that could be very integral to him. Beating Daniel Ricciardo is something he wants to do, and it looks like he's at least capable of doing it. Whether he will, that's another question. But yeah, in second, this is probably the biggest shocker. It's George Russell with a 1:30.117. So he's 6 tenths basically ahead of Lando Norris. But I have to say the same as Nicholas Latifi. He only competed in one session, which means his time got divided by 1. So, you know, we don't have a lot of data to go off. Obviously, I've just done pure numbers because that's what I want to show everybody. So I only have that, but that was a qualifying run. That probably isn't representative of Williams' pace, although I'm sure we'd all love that to be the case. But no, which means we are left with number 1. And I believe you can all guess who this is. And to be fair play, he's had a great time. It's Max Verstappen with a 1:29.8. He's the only person to make it below the 1:30s, which is still slower than the pole time. But Max Verstappen and Red Bull in general just had a really great test. And if things stay as they are, which is Formula 1, they probably won't, but if things stay as they are, he's got a really good shot at a championship this year, and the average pace says it all, really. So now I want to move on to the actual constructors' pace, which is the average of all the drivers that drove for the team. I'm going to show you 3 different tables. This table that I'm about to go through is just the pure numbers, nothing else. I haven't put in opinion, I haven't put in who I think is sandbagging. I've literally just averaged out the times and gone, this is where they're all put. I'll go through another 2 tables in a minute. So, in 10th place is Aston Martin with a 1:34.329. Now, Aston Martin fans, don't panic too much, because as I said, they had a very poor testing that was plagued by reliability issues. But on the average of your 2 drivers, you are well off the pace. You need to stand up. In 9th is Haas, which I'm sure they would love that to be the case. I'm sure they'd love it if they somehow weren't last. With a 1:33.536. they had a lot of track time because they were just prioritising getting Mick Schumacher out on the track and making sure that their team had as many runs as possible. They aren't going to develop the car. It's not going to end up ninth. Again, I'll save all that, but on pace at the moment they are ninth. In 8th is Mercedes with a 1:32.647. Now, if that happened in real life, well, I'd be very shocked, but I think that would be abysmal for them. Absolutely abysmal. That won't happen. But it has to be said that they also had reliability, which hasn't helped that time. They don't have a stable rear end, which hasn't helped that time. But they also were probably sandbagging as well, which doesn't change the fact that their car doesn't look nice to drive, but it would explain, in part, why it's a lower time. In 7th, we have Williams with a 1:32.193, which is basically half a second off. So, half a second ahead of the Mercedes, which is really good. You know, if I were Williams, stepping up from 10th to 7th, well, that's not easy. It's not easy to even go up one place. But, you know, if they did pull off a 10th to 7th, that would be really good. Again, it's not happening, but also it's worth noting that Roy Nissany has brought that time down. So that time could actually have been higher if Nissany was faster or if he hadn't tested at all. In 6th place is Ferrari. They stayed where they were on average pace with a 1:31.536. As I say, I find it very hard to place Ferrari. I can't really tell where they are or what they're doing. They could be doing anything, and I still wouldn't know where to put them, to be quite honest. In 5th is Alfa Romeo with a 1:31.448. There was an interesting theory from Karun Chandok actually that said that they were using Alfa Romeo to do higher engine modes. Ferrari, that is, they have a Ferrari engine, and that would explain why they're faster, a lot faster than Ferrari. And if that's the case, then I have to say the Ferrari engine is looking good. I mean, it's not looking, it's not looking like a title winner, but it certainly would be capable of good midfield drives from both of their drivers. But Alfa Romeo could be a number of factors. They could have turned the engines up. Maybe their nose has actually helped them go up a lot. A lot of teams have changed their aero concept this season, and a lot of them have changed their design philosophy. You know, we saw with Mercedes, they have the low rake now, and Red Bull have the high rake, where it used to be the other way around. So there could be technical changes, but to be honest, it could just be engine mode stuff, or it could just be other teams are sandbagging, to be honest. It could be a whole number of things. In 4th place, we have Alpha Tauri, which is even more spicy, with a 1:31.323. 4th place, I mean, that would mean that they could be challenging Red Bull at certain tracks. With pace like that, if Yuki and Gasly have the same pace that they kept here, they will be a force to be reckoned with. Not for the championship, but there will be podiums on the table with pace like that. In 3rd was Alpine with a 1:31.279, which is very close, to be honest, but I think they would be very happy with that. They came 5th, so to step up to 3rd, that would be really good for them. As I said, I think Alpine can be very happy with their test. I don't think they'll be 3rd, but I think their pace is strong, genuinely, and I think they can be really pleased with that. Which means we've got 2 left. You can imagine who they are. Second is Mclaren with a 1:31.117, and first is Red Bull with a 1:30.376. So first of all, the McLaren, it does look like the class of the midfield, I can't lie. Even without testing times, you could tell they were the most reliable. They seemed the most confident. But the Red Bull, bloody hell, that is fast. They're nearly a whole second ahead of the field. Is that going to stay? No, of course not. But look at the midfield, 2 down to 6 are separated by 5/10, half a second. But then you've just got that massive gap to Red Bull. As I said, Red Bull had a really solid test and they can be proud of themselves. So yeah, that's the pure pace. I think that's very interesting to see. That's how they've all stacked up. It certainly won't be how a lot of teams are hoping they end stacked up, especially not Mercedes. But it's food for thought. Do you think the championship could end like this? Let me know. Now, I've done a realistic order. It's essentially what I did for this. It's not scientific at all. But essentially what I did from this was I looked at everybody and I thought, who do I think can make gains? Who do I think was sandbagging? Who do I think is probably stronger than they're showing? Who's weaker than they seem? And, you know, kind of based on what we've seen at testing, what is realistically possible? So what's realistically possible for me is Haas in 10th, because they're not developing the car and they didn't look great. They were only 9th because Aston Martin had problems. In 9th, Williams. They seem to have decent pace, but let's not pretend like they have been amazing the last couple of years, and let's not pretend like they've made a massive resurgence. In 8th, Alfa Romeo. I expect them to be the head of the back, pretty much, because I don't expect that their aero concept has actually driven them forward that much, and I think a lot of teams will probably hiding some pace. In 7th, Aston Martin, because even if their pace is higher, they do have reliability issues, they do have problems, and that could catch them out a few times. Also, they were apparently comparable to Ferrari on long run pace. However, I saw more of the Ferrari than the Aston, which is why I've put Ferrari in 6th and Aston in 7th. Could easily switch, or maybe Aston Martin sorted everything, I don't know, but I'm just saying, purely from the testing numbers, this is kind of where I think people will actually be stacking up at the moment. In 5th, Alpha Tauri, because they do look strong, they do look like they've made strides. Even without the testing, again, they do look like they're a strong package. I don't really know what more can be said there. In 4th, Mercedes. Again, the realistic order, okay, we didn't see that much pace, and take away the sandbagging, they still don't look so hot. So I think, judging by the sort of pace we were seeing and, you know, potentially in my mind how much they could actually gain, 4th seems to be where they're at, purely from testing. In 3rd, Alpine. 2nd, McLaren, and 1st, Red Bull. The Alpine, I don't think, was ever faster than the McLaren, but they do seem really fast and they do seem a lot better than the Mercedes. That doesn't mean they'll be better, but there's that. And McLaren and Red Bull, it's hard to argue that at the moment those guys are not 1-2. To be honest, it would be unprofessional, I think, to say that they weren't the 2 best from testing. The final number I want to go on is the realistic championship. This, to me, it's not based off testing numbers, but I mean it is taking testing into account, but it's like, which teams do I think can develop the most, which teams do I think over the course of a season can have a stronger package, can gain things or even lose things, you know, so this is really sort of more a prediction from what's happened rather than a snapshot of what I think. I don't know if that makes sense at all. But the realistic championship is again Haas in 10th, Williams in 9th, and Alfa Romeo in 8th. I shouldn't have to explain that at all. 7th, Alpha Tauri, just because historically Alpha Tauri have, I don't want to say been underwhelming because they had a really good season, but historically they've always been behind the midfield because they have less to lose, because they're a sister team, you know, and they have less money, they have less resources because a lot of it comes from Red Bull, and I know they're trying to be more independent, but it feels like to me the other teams have more potential to move forward going on from race 1 than they do. In 6th, Aston Martin, because I think they're obviously stronger than their testing time, but again, I didn't see much of them, and yeah, if they're comparable to Ferrari, like I said, then Ferrari is above them in 5th. You know, until I see some pace from that car, I can't comfortably say they're anywhere near the top 3 fight at the moment. In 4th, Alpine, I think they've made strides. I don't think they've made more strides than McLaren in 3rd, but both of those teams, McLaren and Alpine, are the ones that seem to have been making a step up in the midfield, which leaves, you know, our 2 boys from last time. I'm going with Mercedes 2nd and Red Bull 1st, because I know Mercedes, they like to develop, they can fix problems and they can find more pace where it's needed. But because of their unstable rear end, I can see them being in accidents, I can see them having reliability issues, and I can see that costing them the championship. Maybe not their pace, they might have great pace, but if they can't get their car together, then I reckon they might ultimately lose out on the championship. Anyway, that's all I have. So, I thought a lot of that was really interesting and really spicy to think about, really thought-provoking. So let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe give me a prediction or what you thought from testing down below. So until then, thank you very much for watching. This is Agent B721 signing out. Peace.